This is the Motivated Business Show, hosted by me, Mark Terrell, the author of Motivated, the Reluctant Leader's Guide to Building a Business that Sets You Free. In my book, I share the 7-step process to get the measure of your business. M.E.A.S.U.R.E is an acronym that stands for Mirror, Evaluate, Action, Systemize, Unify, Review, and Energize. On each episode, I'll be chatting to a business owner about how they stay motivated and how they've got the measure of their business. So without further ado, let's find out who's joining me on this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Motivated Business Show with me, Mark Terrell. And today's guest I met a long time ago. We share the joys of being involved in a family business, so I'm sure that's going to come up in our conversations today. So looking forward to that. Before we get into that though, just a few reminders for those that watch regularly, you know what I do here. Just to remind you, I wrote a book, and in that book I talk about a 7-step process, which I will be mentioning later on in the episode, because it's how I connect our conversation with the importance of the 7 steps. So in that book, it's all the details you need to know, and you can buy that book either from Amazon or direct from myself in paperback or in Kindle form. Just to let you know, if you'd like to contribute to the podcast and keep the wheels in motion, as they say, then you can click through to my buy me a coffee link. And anything that's donated is greatly received. It just makes sure that we can keep the show on the road, as it were, as we don't have a sponsor. Just to mention that. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest. Welcome, Sarah.
Morning, Mark.
Right, just before we get stuck into the conversation then, let's give you the opportunity to introduce yourself properly.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Bays. I'm a director or owner of Montage Mediation, and I'm a conflict resolution specialist and also working conflict coaching and volunteering with Essex Police as a mediator and restorative justice practitioner.
Wow, that's an extra bit of information there I didn't know about. Exactly. So I mentioned at the start of the show that we met a while ago. We were at a family business conference, I believe, at the time. We're going to talk about that, obviously, but first of all, we need to talk about what you do now. And at the time, you weren't doing what you do now. So let's talk about what mediation is. How did you become involved in mediation for a starter?
So you're right, Mark. When we met last time, I was a director in my husband's family business, and I was there for some 20, maybe even 25 years. And my passion within that business was working with the team in leadership and management side of things. Mm-hmm. And what we did was sell office furniture, and that part of the business really didn't float my boat. So I was starting to look for something that I might do either voluntary or in my retirement, semi-retirement, something that might give me a bit of an added interest. And I came across mediation. I started to volunteer, or I applied to volunteer with Essex Police as a mediator and a practitioner in restorative justice, mm-hmm. which I absolutely love, and then realised that actually the issues that we'd had as a family business when we transitioned from when we actually purchased the business from the remaining members of my husband's family could actually quite easily have been resolved with mediation if only we'd known it existed. So, right. So I've gone on to establish Montage Mediation. I do offer mediation in all areas, but my specialism is really getting stuck in with family businesses and helping them to sort of navigate through conflict, basically, and maintain their family relationships, which unfortunately we didn't manage to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever you talk about family businesses, either people have got this sort of like polarized sort of thing where either people think, "Oh, it's great. It must be great to have a family business," but then there's other people that might have had a bad experience and actually say, "I wouldn't go anywhere near that with a barge pole," sort of thing. But I think that, I mean, there's good and bad with everything, and I think we can hopefully explore a little bit around that and our good experiences and why things sort of problems occur that need mediation. But before we do that, my thoughts now are thinking about, well, what other forms of conflict resolution are there out there? So how does mediation sort of differ from other forms of conflict resolution?
So, mediation is basically about bringing together two or more, perhaps, parties to basically in a neutral space, bringing those parties together to have an open and honest discussion around what's gone on, and how thinking about how those issues might be resolved. If you think about taking a case to court, basically a civil litigation these days just takes absolutely forever. The courts have got such a huge backlog. So the time involved with going through the courts. The other thing with going through the courts, or even arbitration, which is arbitration is similar to mediation, but it passes the control for the outcome to a judge, whereas mediation is down to the parties themselves to come to some form of to negotiate basically some outcome that works for both parties. So you're not handing over the control. The time involved is much less with mediation. It's weeks rather than months or even years. The costs, obviously, you don't need legal advice. Sometimes you would have legal advisors with you, but it's not the same as going through a litigation. And the idea with mediation is that we aim to preserve the relationship. So let's say it's a customer and a supplier situation, and actually both parties really do need each other for whatever reason, as part of their ongoing businesses. So the hope is that with mediation, we can negotiate around the issue that's arisen and actually come out with an outcome that works for both parties and means that they can keep working together.
Yeah, and I go back to what you just said there. I suppose it's really important to allow everybody to be able to say what they need to say.
Yeah.
And when you get people, I suppose, on their own without, I'm assuming what you do is almost like facilitate it. Part of what you
Absolutely,
do,
it's
yeah.
about steering, and a big part of the success of mediation is actually in the preparation work. So, is actually initially the discussions are private. Everything in mediation is confidential, which again is another plus because it means that your reputation is not at stake. Whereas if you go through the courts, obviously you can be prone to things
Yeah.
coming out in the press and so on. So yeah, you're sitting back and you're actually listening to each other, and so much of conflict actually comes out of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And it's just amazing to see so often just see the penny drop with somebody who might sit there and say, I didn't understand that, I didn't realize that's why
Yeah.
this happened, I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, so it's so important to let people speak and have
Absolutely.
let the opportunity to speak, and also sitting back and just listening and listening. And obviously listening is a skill in itself, isn't it? It's about
Yeah,
understanding that you've got to listen to hear someone as opposed to listen with regards to what you're going to say next. And that's the trouble with most conversation, is most people are just waiting to say what they want to say, isn't
exactly.
it? Yeah.
Like
Yes.
I just did with you. So
Yes.
yeah, that's exactly it. We listen, but we're not really listening, and that's the skill again of a mediator, is having listened to both parties before a mediation, and understanding where often a party will come in, or both parties, with a position which might be, I want my invoice paid, I want it paid today. But actually, the mediator skills is about understanding what goes beyond that and what the real needs are. So actually, I do want my invoice paid, but I still want to be able to work with you. And so there might be some negotiation around that means that that there can be an ongoing relationship. So yeah, it's about getting to more than just the opening position.
Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned that you've worked for the police and for businesses. So particularly, let's concentrate on businesses because it's mainly about businesses that I sort of involved with. So what are the main benefits of mediation with regards to business apart from the obvious?
Well, like I say, the main benefits are that you are everything is confidential, so you're protecting your reputations, you're maintaining control. There's many different types of mediation. So you might, as an employer, you might need to have a mediation between two of your employees who are not communicating, or for whatever reason they have some conflict, and to be able to resolve that issue in such a short space of time actually stops that issue spiraling out of control and obviously filtering down to the rest of your team. And the same with businesses, like I say, with supplier, customer, maybe, or two businesses, clashing over customers. So basically, in those cases, it is about trying to maintain those relationships. Again, it's the length of time that it takes. Mediation can be sorted in just a matter of weeks, and it does just give both parties an opportunity to come out of it with their reputation intact and their relationship.
Yeah, yeah. So I just wrote something down because I learned so much on these podcasts, and I've written down not taking sides. So, not taking sides with regards to what the first thing you said, with regards to two employees that you're trying to manage that just aren't getting on. Now, if you're managing, leading them, whatever you want to call yourself, then actually it's quite difficult to be unbiased, isn't it? So I
Very
guess
difficult.
so. Rather than do it yourself, if you facilitated without the leader, manager, or a team leader,
Yeah.
whoever is involved, being involved, then I'm guessing that changes the dynamics in a big way, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. Because a
Yeah,
mediator is completely neutral,
yeah,
and there's a huge benefit to the mediator being somebody who is completely not known to either of the parties. In fact, when um, when we contact parties in the initial stages, often we will say to them, actually, please don't tell me anything about what's going on until we get further down the line, because
yeah,
sometimes too much information in the early stages. So yeah, if you're involved, I mean, there are obviously, if you're a big corporation with a big HR department, you might have an HR manager who isn't connected personally with either of the parties.
yeah,
But there's not many businesses that are in that position, and yeah, to have somebody on the outside come in and just listen
yeah.
and be able to steer the conversation skillfully towards what really is at the bottom of it is invaluable.
Yeah, I'm following the post office inquiry quite closely because of my retail background, and we actually, as a family business, were contemplating taking on a post office. But from what you said already, that what should have happened, would there should be some mediation between the post office and the post mistresses and masters, because the trouble was that it was all being controlled by one party, and so
By
it
one
never worked.
party,
You can see what
absolutely. Yeah.
happens when one person has
it
holds the power, doesn't it? So I think,
yeah, it wasn't
from what I can
neutral
see,
at all.
yeah, so mediation is about giving equal power to both parties, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, mediation is the key to mediation is control is in the hands of the parties.
yeah,
So control for the outcome. The outcome has to be basically agreed, and they need to come up with the solution and means for going forward. We always look at what's happened in the past, but actually mediation is about focusing on what's going to happen in the future, and how to steer out of this situation that you're in.
yeah. And it's getting a mutually agreeable solution so that most people can move on, because that's what most people do, want to move on eventually. And yeah, it's finding the solution and having someone that can facilitate that. So let's
Yeah.
talk about the family business side of things that you're passionate about. So let's talk about the difference between what you see, the difference between a non-family business and a family business.
So I think the main difference is that there's so much more at stake when you're involved in a family business. And because there's so much more at stake, there's so much more that can go wrong. And basically, especially if you're in a business where there are multiple family members, and if you come to a stage where you're not agreeing over a particular issue, very quickly that can get so out of hand. And with differing loyalties amongst family members, it can lead to just splits the family so quickly. It can be so toxic. And I think what those of us who've been in family businesses perhaps don't grasp as well is that when we as family members are in conflict, that is also having a massive impact on the wider employee group.
Yeah.
And they are also compromised, and the business suffers as a result. So, and not only the business suffers, but obviously the family relationships suffer. And the longer you leave that conflict to fester, the worse it becomes, because unfortunately human nature tells us, or human nature dictates, that when we're in conflict, that conflict might start at a point and be about a single issue, but unfortunately if we don't resolve that conflict during that journey, we continue to hurt each other. And we do things that we might not automatically, we behave towards one another in ways that we might not otherwise. So that the whole thing becomes so much more difficult to resolve. So the thing with family businesses is really, it's so key to intervene at the early stages, and to actually, and when we're family businesses too, actually the worst thing that we do is that we don't actually talk. We talk, but we don't talk. And we don't sit down and discuss the difficult issues. And again, that's where conflict resolution, mediation allows you that chance to find a safe space to sit back and actually talk about those issues openly and honestly, and thrash them out with a neutral facilitator at the head of the table, which hopefully will then allow you to go on and continue with a successful business. But
Yeah.
it just ruins so many families so many times. I
Yeah.
hear the same thing, and it's just really sad. So it's crucial to get in early.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get it. Exactly. I've been there and done it. And I think one of the things you don't get with a family business when you're involved with a family business is that you don't get the opportunity to walk away. So
No.
when you're working for an organisation, work is one thing, you come home to your family. When those two things are linked, then there's almost like there's no escape, there's no way out, because when you're at home you can't stop thinking about, okay, we can have issues with all our any work environment, but with the family situation going on at the same time, there doesn't seem a way out, and
Yeah.
quickly get boxed in. And like you say, with when you get conflict and problems, tends to be that people just start spouting off and saying things that come emotionally driven,
Yeah.
and of course that just heightens the problem and doesn't actually
Absolutely.
get to solving the problem, does it?
No, absolutely. And I think about our sons. They come home. When they come home, they can talk to us about their business and about how things are going at work, and they can do that safely, and know that they can say anything about what's going on in their careers and in their working environment. Whereas when you're in a family business, you don't. I mean, we're a perfect example. Our own son came into the business, and it just didn't work because it was just too close to home. And
Yeah.
it takes something really special to make a success out of a family business, and people should reach out and get as much help as they can with that, because it's a
Definitely.
really special thing to be involved in.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good point to move on to exactly the sort of services that you offer to family businesses and the type of support you give. Presumably, it's not just bringing people together into a room and thrashing things out. There's a bit more to it than that.
I think with family business, that the key is to actually, rather than start the process with the conflict, is in terms of family businesses, is to start the process with what each family member wants from that business. Because I think so often you hear that people sort of they fall into the family business, and actually it might not be what they might not be where they want to be. Not everyone wants to be the managing director of a family business. They actually might want to be on the shop floor. And so I think the first place to start is to establish where everybody wants to be, and where everybody sort of the visions and goals for each individual as being part of that business. And then to be able to, so if you can establish that actually the business can support what everybody wants, then okay, then you can start talking about the conflict, which is normally easy to resolve, and start planning for the future. But if you stumble at that first stage, then actually the next piece of work is talking about how you exit that business, or how you maybe separate the business if it's not going to work. Then that's the next piece of work. Whereas rather than, obviously you still need to deal with the conflict, but it's a much different picture. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, no, I get absolutely get it. So I'm just trying to bring out all the details for the listeners and viewers here to sort of understand the dynamics of a family business. I think most people get it, but actually, some things you can't actually really know unless you've actually experienced it. So I'm guessing that your experience with family businesses is important, and obviously one of the drivers for your focus on that area because you've experienced and you
Yeah,
can see what can go
absolutely.
wrong.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been there in a number of situations. Actually, I've actually been the director of two different family, one within my own side of the family, and one in my husband's family. So yeah, I definitely get it. And as I say, so it really is about when we bought the business. We I didn't know that mediation existed, and we'd never even done worked with business coaches before. And I think that's what I understand now, and coaching with businesses, and trying to look at the bigger picture, and bring the family together on a regular basis rather than just when there is conflict.
Yeah.
Actually, you should be doing that as a regular basis, is away from the business and away from the family, in a neutral environment that just allows you to sit back and talk openly and honestly, and feel safe to do that. And I think that's what mediation does. But actually, in my offering for family businesses, it's much bigger than that. It's coaching as well.
Yeah, I get that too. Yeah, what I've realised in most people that go into some sort of coaching training or what you do, I don't know how you describe it, but there's a bit of like as you mentioned, coaching. It's all driven by an experience and preventing people making the mistakes
The
that they've
same
made.
mistakes.
And that's the drive behind it, isn't it? So don't make this mistake because I know what happens if you do. So, and that's so valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's very painful, and
Yeah.
the impact, it just goes on, and that's really sad. And so yeah, I think it's really important that everybody in the family is listened to and everybody's understood. And as I say, so much of the conflict comes from misunderstanding and miscommunication. So having the tools to be able to have those discussions on a regular basis and keep on top of those, those issues. There will be issues and there will be disagreements, and often you hear in family businesses, wasn't the case in ours, but often you hear that there are wider members of the family who are involved, and that can create resentment. It might be a sister-in-law, or um, you
Yeah.
know an auntie who is involved in some way. And and they might not be part of the very close family, and that in itself can cause issues. So yeah, it's really important to keep on top of those relationships in both the business and the family.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah. Well, it's really interesting what we talked about. I'm going to give you time to just sit back a little while. I'm just going to share bits and pieces that I feel more with regards to preventing. Let's bring you back on screen. Just so you're there. Just from a view of preventing these problems, because I've experienced them myself. And with regards to motivation, I think it has a role to play in particular. So first of all, let's just talk about the steps in the 7-step process, which are particularly relevant, I think, what we've been talking about. Understanding yourself is so essential in these situations to prevent conflict. If you understand people and just understand yourself better, and also understand other people that you work with better, that is definitely going to help you prevent misunderstandings, firstly. And with regards to a team, when we come this, I cover this in Unify, is actually embracing our differences is important. So understanding yourselves and then realizing, as you've already spoken about, Sarah, in that you have to accept that different people are right for different roles. So understanding how you bring a team together that want to be together for the right reason, understanding what they contribute to the team. So let's move on to motivation and what I see as what I've seen as conflicts. There's 2 types of conflicts that I see actually in particular. I'm going to just explain both of them. So you can have 2 motivators that are almost like going into 2 different directions. So for instance, let's talk about the friend motivator, which is about belonging, being part of seeking belonging in friendships. And then you've got the spirit, which is about freedom, autonomy, and independence. So just by describing them, you can see that they're completely different. So sometimes you get people that have opposing motivations that can cause miscommunications and misunderstandings. So that's one way that we can understand, just by sharing our different motivators can prevent misunderstandings and the need for mediation. And the other one is what comes up in the team report in the Motivational Maps world, where we can see where people are, what we see here. So there's an example where someone has the friend motivator as one of their most important, and another person in the team has it as their least important. So because of that polarity of being one thing being important to one person and it being least important to the other, that can cause issues with regard to the way they communicate, the way they think, things they want to do at work, and the way they do things. And there's another example there. There is star, so somebody wanting recognition as one of their most important things, but not somebody else wanting it as the least important thing. So there's a couple of things there that I've come across in my work, and I think definitely was relevant with regards to when I was in my family business. So let's just see what you have to say about any of that, Sarah. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I think as well is that's where we come back to is getting around the table and being heard and listening to other members of the team, because like you say, we don't all communicate in the same way, and often when we sit around the boardroom or we sit at team meetings, we're all speaking at once and we're all trying to get our own point across, and without actually taking the time to sit back and actively listen to what other people are saying. And I think that's the sort of the mediation space, if you like, is very much about uninterrupted speaking time. So everybody gets a chance to speak without being interrupted, and naturally when you are bound by that, you hear much more about what's being said, and your understanding is much greater. So yeah, I think that is a real key, is being able to get your point across and being able to listen to others.
Yeah, and what about with regards to your position as the mediator in that sort of scenario? What if you hear something that's really important that you don't think the other person's heard? is that part of what you do? Is to actually, did you just hear what
Yeah.
the other person just said there?
Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
about sort of reframing and reinforcing those messages that have come out that maybe and it's about testing the other person's response to that. How did you feel about that? How did that make you feel to hear that? And even if they maybe haven't given it as much credence at the time, when you're asked those questions, you have no option but to give it that real consideration. So yeah, that's a big part of mediation.
Yeah, yeah. Sadly, Sarah, our time is running out. I could talk to you for hours because I think this is such an interesting topic, and I didn't tell you earlier, but it's something I considered actually going down and getting trained in mediation. I didn't, and I won't now. But now I know what you do.
There's
Then,
still time.
well, who knows? I'm sure there's things that you've learned that you've able to use practically in day to day as well, as you do with all these sort of
Absolutely.
things, don't you?
Yeah,
So I'm really interested in what you do, and obviously, if I get anybody in the future that have got to this point, then I know where to go now. And if you're listening to
absolutely. I'd love
this,
to hear from you.
yeah, mediation is such an important way to preserve relationships. That's the most
Yeah,
important thing, as
that's
we
the
talked
big
to
thing.
with regards to family
Yeah,
businesses. But in all shapes, you want to make sure that things that can be retrieved are retrieved, and that's where I
yeah.
see it's,
And
it's such a value.
that you retain control for the outcome is really important.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you again, Sarah, for your time today.
Thanks, Mark.
Look forward to catching up again very soon.
Indeed. Thanks for having me.
There we are, Sarah. Mediation. I definitely am a fan. I think it's got lots to offer where people are having difficulties to resolve an issue. Mediation must be the way forward if you actually want to resolve a situation. And as you've heard, Sarah has all the skills to facilitate that. So get in touch with her. That's right. So just a reminder about the book. I've alluded to the 7 steps. There's more about it in the book. So if you buy the book from me, you can actually buy that book by buying me 2 coffees. So buy me 2 coffees and I'll send you a thank you in my book. So if that's of interest, then and also contributes to keep the podcast on the road as well. And then there's this QR code, which is easier if you want to. That take you straight to my Buy Me a Coffee page. Thank you for those that joined us live. And if you catch this on replay and you have any comments, then please don't hesitate to leave us any questions that you'd like myself or Sarah to answer. We'd be more than happy to answer them. And obviously, if there's anything else that we can help you with, then don't hesitate to get in touch. So there we are. That's today's show done and dusted. And looking forward to the next one. But until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day.